Multiple devices එකවර connect කළ හැකි. Internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber. Multiple devices එකවර connect කළ හැකි. Internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber.
Tonight, walk the talk. Dhammika Perera takes oaths as the new investment promotion minister with major pressure to deliver on pledges. The Golden Goose. Sri Lanka's oil and gas surveys are to be on display in London on Thursday with major investments expected. No escape. Sri Lanka's UN envoy Mohan Pires gets served summons in the Hamilton Bank lawsuit against the government. Safety in numbers. 4 remanded activists refuse bail in solidarity with their 3 compatriots still in detention. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Friday, the 24th of June, 2022.
Best ever sunlight. Dan Rupial Desiyaka best ever milakata.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, you're watching First at 9 with me, David Ebert. Now, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna Nationalist Member of Parliament Dhammika Perera took oaths today as the new Minister of Investment Promotion and Technology before President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Having promised to bring in major investments and create jobs, a lot rests on the tycoon and his pledges to help the government pull through its economic crisis.
Prominent businessman Dhammika Perera was sworn in as the Nationalist Member of Parliament for the vacant Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna Nationalist parliamentary seat on the 21st of this month. Following the gazetting of 2 new ministries earlier this month by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Perera was tipped to take over the portfolio of Minister of Investment, Promotion and Technology. Accordingly, Perera was sworn in before President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the President's House in Fort this afternoon as the new Minister of Investment, Promotion and Technology.
Now, Sri Lanka's newly mapped out oil and gas survey results are to be presented at the prestigious Southeast Asia Petroleum Exploration Society Asia Pacific Conference in London next Thursday, where some of the world's biggest oil investors are set to take a first look at Sri Lanka's potential. With billions of barrels of oil and 9 trillion cubic feet of gas, the discovery in Mena and the Cauvery basins in the northwestern and northern seas of Sri Lanka could very well become a potential multi-billion-dollar revenue stream for the government. After having concluded the first ever aerial mapping of Sri Lanka's petroleum resources in the last quarter of 2021, one of the world's leading gravity radiometry companies, Bell Geospace, plans to present these insights together with Wintermoon Geophysics at the prestigious Southeast Asia Petroleum Exploration Society Asia Pacific Conference in London next Thursday, the 30th of June. The mapping project was conducted last year as part of a collaborative effort between Bell Geospace and the government of Sri Lanka, targeting the exploration of offshore oil and gas potential in the seas of the north and northwest of the island. The project entailed the acquisition, processing and interpretation of data from airborne 3D full tensor gravity radiometry and magnetic surveys that were employed to gather data on hydrocarbon potential below the surfaces around the Cauvery Basin of the northern peninsula and the Mena Basin of the west coast. Data and interpretation from the survey has given the Sri Lankan government new insights into the structure, tectonic history and hydrocarbon potential of Sri Lanka's Mena Basin, demarcated as M1 and M2, and the Cauvery Basin C1 blocks. With Sri Lanka's annual fuel importation bill staggering $6 to $7 billion and the domestic hydrocarbon potential estimated at several billion barrels of oil and 9 trillion cubic feet of gas, this is a potential multi-billion-dollar revenue stream for the government of Sri Lanka. This is all the more true, especially when taking into consideration the fact that oil and gas exploration company Cairn India, which explored the Mena M2 block, had invested a massive $200 million in the region 10 years ago. Additionally, with Bell Geospace's modern geophysical data and interpretation, the publicity created at a major oil and gas conference such as CPEX in London holds the potential for Sri Lanka to attract a new round of foreign investors who could end up bringing in much needed US dollars to the country. Now, the government's plan to distribute fuel prioritizing healthcare workers on Fridays, which started today, has not worked out as intended. Many healthcare workers were seen waiting in queues for hours at designated fuel stations across the island as no fuel had been delivered. This had in turn, just like before, caused severe delays to them in reaching hospitals for duty.
The fuel crisis in the country has had far-reaching implications for the economy and almost every industrial sector. The crisis has severely affected economic growth and inconvenienced the daily lives of the people, including employees of essential services such as medical personnel. As a remedy, the Ministry of Health announced earlier this week that measures will be taken to dispense fuel to health workers every Friday at 74 filling stations. Even though this measure commenced today, some health workers who made it to dedicated refilling stations were inconvenienced, as the filling stations had not been restocked with fuel. Healthcare workers in many areas such as Maharagama, Watupitiwala, Kegol, Puttalam and Madargiriya, to name a few, were seen waiting in queues for long hours. Some relief was expected to be granted to people waiting in fuel queues with the arrival of a shipment of fuel yesterday. However, Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara, taking to Twitter, said that the 40,000 metric tons of fuel that was expected yesterday has been delayed by a day. As such, the vessel is expected to reach Sri Lankan shores today. Amidst this inconvenience, people have been continuing to wait in queues day in and day out, waiting for fuel to be distributed. Military personnel have taken measures to serve food and beverages to people waiting in queues. In the meantime, due to the lack of fuel at the IOC filling station in Madargiriya over the last 7 days, people who had been waiting in line for fuel last night protested by burning tires at the Madargiriya-Kalagiri bridge. However, area residents along with the police had intervened and taken steps to clear the blocked roads. In the meantime, with no fuel supplies delivered to the refilling stations located in Panchikavatta for over 5 days, the people waiting in line for fuel had begun protesting. In other developments, despite Litrogas Lanka Limited's calls for the people to not wait in line as 2 shipments of LP gas are expected to reach the island between the 6th and the 12th of July, it has fallen on deaf ears. Many people continue to stay in lines outside retail outlets waiting for gas to be distributed.
Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Piris met his Indian counterpart Dr. S. Jaishankar today on the sidelines of the CHOGM summit in Kigali, Rwanda. The meeting was dubbed as a neighbours meeting by the Indian External Affairs Minister and had focused on discussions pertaining to India's support to Sri Lanka during the crisis and included further pledges of continued assistance.
India's External Minister S. Jaishankar met with his foreign counterpart Professor G.L. Piris in Rwanda yesterday and discussed India's crucial support for Sri Lanka. The meeting took place on the sidelines of the CHOGM summit in Kigali, Rwanda. Jaishankar's meeting with Professor Piris took place hours after a 4-member delegation led by Indian Foreign Secretary Vinay Kwatra met President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in Colombo and offered reassurances that India stands ready to help the country's quick economic recovery through promoting investments, connectivity and strengthening economic linkage. Minister Jaishankar tweeted after the meeting that he held a neighbours meeting with Professor G.L. Piris on the margins of the Commonwealth Summit and talked about Commonwealth issues as well as India's support for Sri Lanka at this time. Professor G.L. Piris is currently representing President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Commonwealth Heads of the Governments meeting taking place in Kigali, Rwanda from the 21st to the 25th, attended by the 54 member states of the Commonwealth. The Indian delegation, which visited Colombo first, met President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and then Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe yesterday, where both sides highlighted the importance of promoting India-Sri Lanka investment partnership, including in the fields of infrastructure, connectivity, renewable energy, and deepening economic linkages between the two countries, a media release from the Indian High Commission said. During the meetings, the Indian delegation underscored that the unprecedented recent economic, financial and humanitarian assistance of over $3.5 billion to Sri Lanka was guided by India's neighbourhood first policy and the security and growth for all in the region vision of Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
At a meeting between President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and ambassadors of European Union member countries today, the envoys have informed the head of state that international assistance can definitely be forthcoming. However, it all depends on Sri Lanka presenting a proper plan for recovery of its economy. Further, pledges were also given for continued support from the EU, as the President urged them to support Sri Lanka's need for fertilizer, fuel and food aid. A meeting between the ambassadors of the European Union member states in Colombo and President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was held at the President's house this morning. During the talks, the EU envoys pointed out that the international community could easily assist Sri Lanka based on the country presenting a firm plan for rebuilding its crisis-hit economy. The EU ambassadors also urged the President to consider the European Union as a friend of Sri Lanka and offered assurances that they would continue to support Sri Lanka during this difficult time. The President pointed out that with 90% of the country's population residing in rural areas and 75% of them engaged in agriculture, assistance could help solve the issues relating to fertilizer, fuel, as well as food supply. A number of areas, including investment and tourism education, were also discussed at length. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka has received a stock of humanitarian aid worth 3 billion rupees from India. The donation was handed over to Sri Lankan authorities by Indian High Commissioner Gopal Bagle today. The stock of supplies includes 14,700 metric tons of rice, 250 metric tons of milk powder, and 38 metric tons of medicines that was collected by the government of Tamil Nadu. Further, the Tamil Nadu government has also promised to donate a further 40,000 metric tons of rice, 500 metric tons of milk powder, and a second consignment of humanitarian aid, including medicines. Meanwhile, several leading private sector businesses in the country have partnered with the United Nations Development Programme to facilitate the pharmaceutical and food sectors that have been severely affected by the current economic crisis. The project was inaugurated at the United Nations office in Colombo last afternoon. UN Resident Coordinator in Sri Lanka Hana Singha Hamdi was also present at the occasion. Partnering in the program are conglomerate Hemas Holdings, Dilma Tea, Brandex and Daraz. The program aims to target adults and children who have been severely affected by the current economic crisis. Now, Sri Lanka's ambassador to the United Nations, Mohan Pires, has been served with a court summons over a lawsuit filed by the Hamilton Reserve Bank. The Hamilton Reserve Bank on Tuesday sued Sri Lanka in the US District Court in Manhattan over the country's default on a $1 billion sovereign bond maturing next month. Hamilton Reserve Bank Limited demanded immediate payment of $257.5 million of principal plus interest, stating that Sri Lanka had stopped servicing its sovereign debt and missed payments on two other bonds, causing a cross default. In its suit, the bank has alleged preferential treatment by the Sri Lankan government towards local banks to pay their dues despite defaulting on international debts. And we'll be back with more news after this short break. Do stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. Now, the fourth magistrate today granted bail to 4 activists arrested on the 17th of June for alleged unruly behavior, among other allegations. Accordingly, the activists Jagat Manuwarna, Jayan Hapuhami, Dhammika Munusinga and Eranga Gunasekara were granted bail, leaving 3 of their compatriots still in remand custody. However, the suspects had refused to be set free today and have chosen to remain in custody until the other activists are granted bail as well.
The 4th Magistrates Court today released 4 out of the 7 activists that were arrested by the police on the 17th of June. This was done after a motion was filed before the 4th Magistrates Court today. As such, the court ordered for the release of Jagat Manuwarana, Jihana Puhami, Dhammika Munasinga and Eranga Gunasekara. However, the remaining activists, namely Ratindu Senaratne, Lahiru Weerasekara and Venerable Ratkarawe Jenaratana Thera, were not granted bail.
අද දවසේදී මේ නඩුවට නම් කළ තිබ්බ සැකකරුව 4 දෙනෙක් අපනියම කිරීමක් සිද්ධ කරා. නමුත් අනෙක් සැකකරුව සම්බන්ධයෙන් සමාන පවතින පෙර වැරදි තියෙනවා නඩු තිබෙනවා කියන කාරණය. අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා පළවෙනි දාට නැවත අපි අපීල්ලීමක් කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
However, despite bail being granted to the 4 suspects, the suspects have refused to be freed until the other suspects were granted bail as well. On the 17th of June, the Colombo 4th Magistrates Court ordered the police to arrest 9 suspects for their unruly and violent behavior during protests that had been carried out at the Colombo Fort and Thalangama on the 9th and the 10th of June, and to produce them before the court. Several charges including criminal coercion, obstruction of duties of police officers, unlawful assembly, causing injuries and other damages to public property have been levelled against the suspects. Later, 7 activists were placed under arrest and remanded until the case was taken up today. In the meantime, a protest march which began from Slave Island last night ended at Galle Face. The protesters demanded for the release of the activists currently in remand.
Meanwhile, former Minister Johnston Fernando recorded a statement at the Criminal Investigation Department today in relation to the May 9th unrest, where SLPP supporters attacked peaceful protesters at Golfis Green and Temple Trees. In the meantime, Fernando has been issued summons to appear in court on the 4th of next month in connection with a case filed by the Bribery Commission for his using Satosa staff for political activities. The Criminal Investigation Department today recorded a statement from former Minister Johnston Fernando regarding the attacks on protesters at Golfis Green and Temple Trees by a group of SLPP supporters. Earlier this month, the CID named MP Fernando, Municipal Councillor Mahinda Kandagama and 2 others as suspects in the case filed over unrest on the 9th of May. Several days later, on the 8th of June, Colombo Fort Magistrate Derana English issued a warrant for the arrest of parliamentarian Fernando. Subsequently, the Court of Appeal ordered him to surrender before 8 p.m. on the 9th of June, as a warrant has been issued for his arrest. The directive came after taking into consideration a writ application filed by the former minister seeking a court order preventing his arrest. The same day, he arrived at the residence of Colombo Fort Magistrate Derana English to surrender and was granted bail. Earlier this week, the Court of Appeal dismissed the writ application which sought an order preventing the Criminal Investigation Department from arresting the MP. Meanwhile, the Fort Magistrates Court granted fresh bail to the SLPP parliamentarian. He was accordingly ordered to be released on 2 personal bonds of 10 million rupees each, while the magistrate also ordered him to report to the Criminal Investigations Department on the final Sunday of every month. Meanwhile, the Colombo High Court has issued summons on the former Minister Fernando and 2 others to serve indictments in a case filed against them for using Satosa employees for political activities. Accordingly, the 3 accused have been ordered to make an appearance before court on the 4th of July. During the previous administration, the Bribery Commission had lodged a case before the Colombo magistrate against Johnston Fernando for allegedly using 153 Lanka Satosa employees in political activities while serving as a minister between 2010 and 2014 and incurring a loss of 40 million rupees to the government. Now, leader of the opposition Sajid Premadasa has labelled the 21st Amendment to the Constitution presented by the government as cowardly and one that does not fulfill the expectations of the people. The leader of the opposition stated this while participating in a program held in Colombo today, where he also explained that the government's attempts to push through a watered-down version of the 19th Amendment is the reason for his refusal to participate in the process.
දේශපාලන ගෙබි දේශපාලනය අනුගමනය කරපු ඇත්තෝ දැන් මහා ලොකුට කතා කරනවා ඔන්න අපි අපේ ව්‍යවස්ථා සංශෝධනය ගෙනාවෝ කියලා. මොකද්ද ගෙනල්ලා තියෙන්නේ? පවතින දුර්දාන්ත පාලනය එහෙයි ස්වාමීනි එහෙයි ශ්‍රීමතාණෙනි කියලා රැකගන්න මහා කුජීත නිවට යෝජනාවක් ගෙනල්ලා තියෙනවා. අවුරුදු දෙකමාරක් රට විනාශ කරලා පෝලිං යුගයේ නිර්මාණය කරලා ආහාර හිඟයක් ඇති කරලා මුළු රටම කියනකොට ගෙදර යන්න කියලා මුළු රටම කියනකොට බලය සීමා කරන්නයි කියලා. ඔව් බලය සීමා කරන්නම් දැන් ඒක කරන්න බෑ. ඒක කරන්න ඊළඟ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඉඳලා. දැන් හිතා ගන්න පුළුවන්ද අපි එකට වාඩි වුණේ නැත්තේ මොකද කියලා? කවුද මූලාසනය දරන්නේ කැබිනට් එකේ? ජනාධිපති. කිව්වා ඔය 19න් හරියන්නේ නැහැ. මගේ 19යි ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නට ඕනේ. එතකොට මොකද උනේ? අගමැති ප්‍රමුඛ මේ හාල්පාරු කැබිනට් එක එහි ස්වාමීනි කිව්වා. ඉතින් මේ විහිළුකාර මේ රංගන දේශපාලනයට අපි නම් හවුලුකරු වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
Now, the Sri Lankan Navy has apprehended another group of individuals attempting illegal migration to Australia by fishing trawler. Following this latest detection, the Sri Lankan Navy has issued a warning to prospective illegal immigrants not to attempt such activities, as local fishing trawlers are not equipped to handle such long trips carrying dozens of passengers, and this could put their lives in extreme danger.
The Sri Lankan Navy has apprehended 35 Sri Lankan nationals in the seas west of Sri Lanka attempting to migrate illegally to Australia in a fishing trawler. The 35 people detained include 4 females and 6 children identified as residents of Trincomalee, Mannar, Bariklo, Negombo, Kalpitiya and Norelia. They were handed over to the Colombo Harbour Police for legal action. Reportedly, there has been a recent surge in illegal migration attempts from Sri Lanka due to the current economic crisis. Furthermore, human smugglers operating fishing trawlers have been reportedly enticing people to attempt illegal migration. Naval officers warn people to avoid such attempts in fishing trawlers, saying that they are not equipped for long voyages carrying passengers.
Illegal migration attempts by the people in the last couple of months on the upward trend. In this year alone, we have apprehended nearly 400 people and the seashore as well. In these incidents, we have intercepted 8 boats and handed them over to the police for legal action. What we have seen here, these boats were old and were not safe for a long passage with large number of people on board. In some cases, we have seen 76 people were on board. It's very dangerous for travel like that because it's very unhygienic, and when the sea gets rough, it becomes a dangerous place to live on. So we identified the trend by the smugglers to fool the people and lure them into their business or the illegal business of transporting them and promising them a safe passage to countries like Australia. But the people didn't know that they were Australia because the Australian Border Protection, they will definitely send them back. So far, nearly 90 people have been turned back by the Australian authorities. When they get caught, they will lose their ability to get into other countries in a legal way. So the Sri Lanka Navy urged people not to get fooled by the smugglers and not to get misled. They were handed over to the police for legal proceedings, and there is a legal action going on until the court verdicts are delivered.
Meanwhile, reports say that Indian fishermen have stepped up attempts to encroach into Sri Lankan territorial waters for illegal fishing activities. However, the Navy says that although cases of encroachment have not extensively increased, the Indian fishermen are taking advantage of empty seas due to the collapse of Sri Lankan fishing industry due to the fuel shortages. Many northern Sri Lankan fishermen are struggling to survive and venture out fishing due to the lack of fuel.
Now, the Ministry of Public Administration has appointed a 7-member committee to explore the possibility of granting government employees 5 years leave to work in the private sector. The decision was taken with the aim of reducing government expenditure by trimming its large public sector wage bill. The committee is expected to present a report to the Cabinet of Ministers within 2 weeks. In a related context, at a cabinet meeting held on the 14th of June, the ministry had also decided to encourage public employees to take up 5 years leave for overseas employment on no-pay basis without affecting their seniority and pensions. Under this program, public officials are able to leave abroad or to work in foreign institutions. Now, the Colombo Bourse ended in the green today for the 4th straight day, with the index gaining 1.26%. The all-share price index closed at 7,651 points after gaining 95.1 points today. The more liquid S&P SL20 also gained 38.75 points to end at 2,470 points today as well. Meanwhile, the equity market turnover was 1.25 billion rupees, compared with 1.1 billion rupees in the previous session. On the CSE's all-share price index, trading volume rose to 44.7 million shares from 43.7 million shares in the previous session. The banking sector was the top contributor to market turnover, whilst the sector's index edged up by 0.05%. Foreign investors were net sellers in the equity market, offloading 68.6 million rupees worth of shares, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing 1.22 billion rupees worth of shares. And that's all the news we have for you tonight. We hope you join us tomorrow at the same time. Good night.